This isn't just about cars, it's about trust shattered. Ford, the brand that built the American middle class, just walked away from its roots with a silent signature that detonated across every factory town in the country. No press conference, no warning, just a cold, calculated decision that rewrote what it means to be made in America. Trump didn't just hear about it, he declared war over it. So how could this move change your job, your wallet, and your country? What did Ford do that broke the unwritten rules? And why did Trump lose it? Stick around. Because in the final chapter, you'll see the terrifying truth no one in Washington wants to say out loud, but it's already happening. Trump's rally turns into a declaration of revenge. Donald Trump was never known for subtlety, and in the wake of Ford's announcement, he didn't waste a moment playing it cool. Within hours, the president took the stage at a rally that had all the energy of a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark came when he slammed the microphone with his fist and declared, "Ford has turned its back on the American worker." The crowd erupted. Not in confusion, not in debate, but in pure, visceral anger. Chanting, shouting, waving flags that weren't just patriotic decoration, but weapons of cultural war. Trump fed the fury. He didn't walk it back, he doubled down. "We built Ford," he yelled. "We made them, and this is how they repay us." It wasn't just political theater. It was a call to arms, a message to every blue-collar family in America that what Ford had done wasn't just a financial decision, it was personal. Trump framed it as a betrayal of the working class, of the country, of everything his America First vision stood for. Tariffs were floated, government contracts were threatened, and above it all was one clear, unforgettable message. Any company that dared leave American soil would pay a price. The fight was no longer about electric vehicles. It was about loyalty. And yet, while the crowd chanted and flags waved, Ford wasn't scrambling. Behind the scenes, they had already made peace with what this would cost them, and prepared for something even bigger. Why Ford had no other choice? While cameras zoomed in on political outrage, the real story was unfolding behind closed doors in conference rooms, spreadsheets, and raw balance sheets. Ford wasn't just reacting to global pressure, it was suffocating under it. The price of steel had climbed. Aluminum became volatile. Lithium, the very heartbeat of electric vehicle battery production, was now a geopolitical gamble. The tariffs implemented during Donald Trump's administration, intended to protect American jobs, had backfired in a way no one in power seemed ready to admit. Instead of shielding Ford, they were choking it. Producing electric vehicles domestically meant absorbing exponentially higher costs than competitors in Asia or Europe. A battery built in the United States could cost up to 30% more than one built abroad. These weren't abstract figures. They were life or death margins. In an industry where survival depends on razor-thin efficiency, Ford executives saw what was coming. They couldn't outspend the problem. They had to outmaneuver it. Staying in the United States meant being eaten alive by competitors who weren't bound by the same economic handcuffs. So the choice wasn't between patriotism and greed. It was between collapse and reinvention. As media headlines screamed about betrayal, the internal reality was cold, clear, and calculated. Ford wasn't abandoning America out of disloyalty. It was stepping away because it couldn't breathe. Still, economic pressure wasn't the only threat Ford faced. There was another, faster-moving adversary already changing the rules, and it wasn't wearing a red tie or waving an American flag. The Tesla trap. While Ford was trapped in century-old infrastructure, dealership contracts, and union negotiations, Tesla rewrote the automotive rulebook from scratch. Direct-to-consumer sales cut out middlemen. Gigafactories in Berlin and Shanghai was Ford the problem, or just the future arriving early? Republican hardliners wasted no time. A flurry of press conferences, cable news appearances, and social media salvos painted Ford as a cowardly multinational, more concerned with shareholder value than American workers. Draft bills began circulating that proposed penalties for any automaker shifting production overseas, including heavy import tariffs and disqualification from federal EV subsidies. Some called for immediate investigations into Ford's global supply contracts. Others demanded that government fleet purchases exclude Ford until it corrected course. In certain corners of Congress, the outrage rivaled that seen after bank bailouts or foreign policy. Ford knew something its critics hadn't yet realized. Tesla wasn't going to wait. The future wasn't going to slow down. And if Ford didn't make a move soon, it wouldn't have a future to protect. That's the kind of shift we dig up, past the headlines, deep into the why. Now you've got the truth without the noise, and ahead of the headlines. The best way to back that kind of work. Tap subscribe and keep this conversation going. Next came the decision that stunned the industry and triggered the next wave of chaos. Ford's boldest move: double down and defy. Ford didn't retreat under pressure, it reloaded. In the days after Donald Trump's rally blitz, analysts expected Ford to clarify, backpedal, or at the very least, soften its message. Instead, the company issued a statement so unflinching it sent a shockwave through the business world. It didn't use the word apologize once. It called the decision a strategic evolution. It framed the global shift not as a rejection of American labor, but as a redirection toward long-term survival. The statement emphasized innovation, agility, and global competitiveness. The word loyalty didn't appear once. Instead, it leaned on terms like mobility leadership, energy independence, and sustainable scale. The real headline, however, was what Ford promised next: over $11 billion to be invested in cutting-edge battery technology, autonomous vehicle research, and global electric vehicle platforms. Ford wasn't running from the future. It was trying to own it. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a challenge, a signal to markets, competitors, and Washington that Ford wasn't afraid to defy the traditional narrative of patriotism and protectionism. Ford wasn't asking for permission. It was rewriting the rules. And just as the statement settled into inboxes and news alerts, tensions erupted on Capitol Hill. The political crossfire erupts. Washington didn't know whether to lash out or lean in. Within 24 hours of Ford's official response, lawmakers across party lines were forced to confront a new and uncomfortable question. Was made Ford manufacturing agile and global, and every vehicle rolled off the line as not just a car, but a software platform, always updating, always improving. Ford had tried to respond. It had poured tens of billions of dollars into electrification efforts. It had launched new models, rebranded its image, and talked endlessly about innovation. But the truth was unavoidable. Ford was always a few steps behind. Tesla didn't just build electric vehicles. It built systems, supply chains, battery technologies, and AI integration that made Ford look like it was stuck in the 20th century. And while Ford struggled to adapt within American borders, Tesla was already operating beyond them. For Ford, survival meant one thing: getting out of its own way, breaking free from the constraints that made it slow, expensive, and outdated. That meant leaving behind factories in familiar cities. That meant taking heat from politicians and the press. It meant becoming the villain of the moment, foreign policy betrayals. Yet within Democratic ranks, the tone was far less unified. Progressive lawmakers argued that Ford's decision, while painful, underscored the urgency of investing in clean energy manufacturing domestically. They didn't want to punish Ford. They wanted to outcompete its foreign suppliers. Moderate Democrats found themselves caught in the crosshairs, representing working-class districts while also promoting climate legislation and technological modernization. Behind closed doors, some quietly admitted Ford had done what any logical company would do in its situation. Still, the storm raged on the House floor, and while elected officials fought over ideology and optics, the private sector had already begun adapting to the new reality. The dominoes start falling. Ford had broken the seal, and others followed fast. Within 2 weeks of the announcement, corporate leaks, anonymous interviews, and regulatory filings revealed that Ford's competitors weren't waiting for backlash. They were making moves of their own. Stellantis rerouted its European battery orders to South Korea. General Motors quietly froze one of its Midwestern facility expansions and signed a memorandum of understanding with a Vietnamese lithium partner. None of these companies wanted the same spotlight Ford had received. They stayed quiet, buried their shifts inside innocuous statements about supply chain resilience and geographic diversification. But industry insiders knew exactly what was happening. The floodgates had opened. Wall Street responded swiftly. Ford's stock, which dipped immediately after Trump's rebuke, began to recover and then climb. Investors saw what policymakers didn't: a company aligning itself with the new rules of the global game. The auto industry was changing, not because Ford had changed, but because the world around it had. While talking heads debated patriotism, business leaders read the writing on the wall. If Ford could take the hit and survive, others could follow the same blueprint. Yet, for all the financial analysis and corporate strategy, there was one group that couldn't pivot so easily: the workers on the ground. Voices from the factory floor. Inside a shuttered facility in Michigan, a veteran worker named Darren unlocked his locker one last time. He had been with Ford for 31 years, built engines with his bare hands, helped train 3 generations of new hires, and now he was unemployed. To Darren, it wasn't just a job, it was identity, community, stability. "They tell us it's progress," he said, "but I'm not getting trained in software engineering at 60 years old." Thousands shared his anger. and even more shared his uncertainty. Union leaders organized rallies outside regional offices. Press interviews featured lifelong workers with tear-streaked cheeks and children holding "Save Our Jobs" signs. The media ran headlines about betrayed towns and disappearing middle-class futures. But in Texas, a different story was unfolding. Janelle, 28, with a degree in electrical engineering, had just received a conditional offer to join Ford's new battery lab in Austin. "They're building something next-gen," she said. "I feel like I'm at the ground floor of something huge." This was the fork in the road Ford had created. Two visions of America, one collapsing, one emerging, living side by side. For the old guard, it felt like abandonment. For the new wave, it felt like opportunity. And in the midst of that emotional collision, Donald Trump prepared to unleash his harshest retaliation yet, Trump's tariff war, round 2. Donald Trump didn't bluff. When he said Ford would pay, he meant it. In the wake of Ford's defiant press release, the White House moved fast. A directive went out to the Department of Commerce and the United States Trade Representative. The instruction: rewrite tariff rules to punish any American company that offshored electric vehicle production. The proposal included a new set of import taxes targeting vehicles assembled outside U.S. borders, even if the brand was American-born. Trump labeled it economic justice. He called Ford a traitor to the American worker and promised financial consequences for betrayal. These weren't just words for a rally. They were the foundation of an economic counteroffensive. He appeared at back-to-back events in Ohio and Indiana, slamming Ford with language usually reserved for foreign adversaries. "They're taking your jobs, your communities, and your future overseas," he shouted. "And we are going to take everything back." Conservative news outlets echoed the message. Business networks speculated on whether Ford could survive politically, even if it survived financially. Suddenly, Ford was more than a company. It was the front line in a war between corporate globalization and economic nationalism. Governors in red states began threatening to review Ford's state-level tax breaks. Senate Republicans discussed defunding Department of Energy grants that supported Ford's EV research. The backlash wasn't just symbolic, it was engineered to hurt. Yet, even as the firestorm gained momentum, Ford stood firm. Because this wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a long game they had been preparing for in silence. Ford's chess move, outsmarting the system. Long before making their move public, Ford's legal and financial teams had built a layered international architecture. Their manufacturing partners were spread across nations that held favorable trade agreements with the United States. Their battery supply lines were routed through Canada, protected under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Electric drivetrains were to be assembled in Germany, then shipped under dual-use technology exemptions. Even Ford's software teams, critical for autonomous systems, were housed in Singapore, classified as R&D affiliates, not core production. What looked like a company fleeing America was, in legal terms, still well within the system. Every contract, every production line, every logistic reroute had been scrutinized, optimized, and shielded. Ford had also made calculated choices to retain a domestic footprint, research centers in Michigan, prototype builds in Texas, a test track in Arizona, just enough to signal continued American investment and to retain access to federal clean energy tax credits. This wasn't just corporate maneuvering, it was intellectual warfare. Ford wasn't apologizing because it didn't have to. It hadn't broken any laws. It had simply outplayed the political system it once helped build. And that was a terrifying realization for lawmakers, especially those who had once championed the company as an emblem of American resilience. What came next was even more jarring, because Ford wasn't alone. The business world rebels. Executives from multiple Fortune 500 companies began voicing quiet support. Lobbying firms representing everything from aerospace to pharmaceuticals warned Congress if Ford was punished, any global company could be next. Industry groups published open letters cautioning that retaliation against one firm could create a chilling effect across sectors investing in innovation. The Chamber of Commerce hinted that punishing Ford would send signals to international investors that U.S. industrial policy was unstable and politicized. Private meetings with senators revealed another concern: confidence. If investors began viewing political vendettas as business risks, capital flight could accelerate. Already, stock markets showed signs of unease. Auto sector shares dipped. Venture-backed EV startups reported anxious calls from limited partners. Capital didn't like uncertainty, and Trump had just lit a match under the nation's biggest manufacturing story. One particularly bold statement came from the CEO of a rival automaker, who, under anonymity, told a reporter, if Trump punishes Ford, he's not punishing disloyalty, he's punishing strategy. Ford had triggered a turning point, and that realization arrived just as the company dropped its most aggressive play yet, the billion-dollar bet. Ford wasn't finished. It was just getting started. With the world's eyes on its every move, Ford made a bold announcement: a massive expansion into global battery innovation and autonomous vehicle systems. Over $5 billion earmarked for building new facilities, forming international research alliances, and locking down rare earth materials for future production. New partnerships were announced in rapid succession: a lithium supplier in Quebec, a next-generation cathode manufacturer in South Korea, a battery innovation lab in Germany, a proprietary AI system being developed in partnership with a Singaporean firm. These weren't just investments, they were foundations. It aimed to secure the entire vertical stack, from raw material to software interface. The message behind the move was unmistakable. Ford didn't see the electric future as American or foreign. It saw it as post-national. The company had embraced a world where success wasn't defined by geography, but by integration, speed, and foresight. And they were betting that by the time Washington finished arguing, Ford would already own the future. Critics called it arrogance. Loyalists said it was betrayal. Markets called it smart. But beyond the headlines, a deeper question took root. If Ford could do this and get away with it, what would stop every other American company from following? The answer would begin to unfold in Part 4. The death of Made in America. Once the phrase Made in America meant something. It meant factories. It meant steel, sparks, and smoke. It meant your neighbor built the car you drove and your cousin stitched the seats. It was more than a label, it was a promise. That promise has been broken. Ford's announcement shattered more than production models. It shattered the illusion that American industry still lives inside American borders. Supply chains now stretch across oceans. Rare earth materials come from mines in Australia and Africa. Software is written in Asia. Assembly is done wherever it's cheapest, fastest, most efficient. This is no longer a temporary trend. It's a structural shift. And Ford didn't cause it. It exposed it. The idea that a car could be purely American has become mathematically impossible. A Ford electric vehicle may still wear a Detroit badge, but its parts, power, and programming arrive from every corner of the planet. Consumers don't see it. Politicians pretend it's not happening, but factory towns feel it. They know what it means when a shift gets cut, when an engine line goes silent, when an entire wing of a plant gets boarded up with no warning. To many Americans, Made in America is now a museum exhibit, a memory dressed in patriotism, surrounded by silence. And for those left behind, it's not just nostalgia, it's survival. The American worker's new reality. Darren used to build transmissions. Now he delivers packages. Janelle codes firmware for electric drivetrains, but her father still doesn't understand what she does, and he worked at Ford for 35 years. This is the new divide. The American worker isn't disappearing, it's splitting. There are jobs, but they don't look like they used to. Robotics technicians, lithium chemists, machine learning engineers, data modelers. These roles are growing, but they aren't for everyone. Not for those trained in welding, machining, paint, or tool and die. Not for those who spent decades mastering physical craft. Retraining programs offer hope, but they're slow, they're inconsistent, and often they don't match the reality of workers' lives. Aging parents, mortgage payments, physical limitations, and skill ceilings. You can't just download a new career at 48. Meanwhile, factories are evolving into clean rooms, silent, surgical, staffed by fewer people, surrounded by more screens. One technician can now do the work 10 line workers used to do. And that technician, often a contractor, not an employee. No pension, no union, no overtime. The traditional pipeline, from high school diploma to auto plant to retirement, is gone. In its place, a disjointed scramble for digital relevance. For every Janelle who gets a foothold in the new economy, there are 10 Darrens wondering where they fit in. The story of Ford is no longer a story about cars. It's a story about people running out of places to belong. Who's really winning? Ford says it's winning. Tesla probably is. Wall Street's pleased. Trump's rallies are packed. But beneath the noise, the question that won't go away is, who's really winning? Is it Ford, nimbly reconfiguring itself for a future without borders? Is it Trump, rallying millions around a message of national loyalty? Or is it something bigger and colder? The global market doesn't care where you're born. where your job used to be, or which flag is stitched into your overalls. It rewards agility, efficiency, scale, and that means loyalty is a liability. The companies that win are the ones that break up with their past faster than their competitors. Ford's pivot wasn't evil. It was expected, maybe even necessary. But that doesn't mean it didn't leave damage in its wake. Patriotism doesn't pay for raw lithium. National pride doesn't fund autonomous navigation systems. And Trump's America First policy, no matter how loud the chant, has run headfirst into an economic wall. Manufacturing doesn't come back with slogans. It comes back with supply chains, skilled workers, stable policy, and competitive costs. Without those, the chant becomes a dirge. The truth, there's no clear winner, only survivors, and millions of Americans caught in the crossfire between innovation and tradition. Yet the ripple effects of this battle aren't limited to the automotive world. They're just beginning. The next industries to fall. If Ford can't survive on American soil, what hope do other industries have? The alarm bells are no longer just ringing. They're deafening. Steel manufacturing has quietly shifted to South Korea and India. American solar panel companies now rely on Chinese materials. Pharmaceutical supply chains are scattered across Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Defense contractors, even those building weapons for the United States military, source components from foreign suppliers. The illusion of domestic dominance is fraying. What began as outsourcing for cheap labor has evolved into full-on supply chain offshoring. Not just products, but core competencies. Research, design, assembly, logistics, intelligence. Even tech giants, once hailed as the vanguard of American innovation, are hedging their bets. Semiconductor manufacturing is being decentralized. Cloud storage is going global. Artificial intelligence development is increasingly international. The American economic model is unraveling not because companies are evil, but because the system rewards them for moving fast, cutting costs, and thinking globally. Ford's decision wasn't betrayal. It was a case study. And now other CEOs are watching. They're watching how Trump reacts, how markets adjust, how consumers respond. They're asking themselves, if Ford can survive this storm, why can't we do the same? Already, early signs are emerging. Appliance manufacturers rerouting plants to Mexico. Aerospace firms investing in Eastern European factories. Medical device suppliers exploring options in Southeast Asia. One by one, the dominoes are lining up, and Ford was simply the first to fall. The end of an economic identity. This isn't just about jobs. It's about losing the last threads of who we thought we were. There was a time when America was defined by what it built. Ford meant horsepower. Boeing meant global reach. Silicon Valley meant digital freedom. These weren't just companies, they were symbols of national pride. Now, they're just addresses in a filing cabinet, shells with offshore production lines and remote workforces scattered across time zones. Borders don't define value anymore. Networks do, and networks don't pledge allegiance. Ford's shift wasn't just a manufacturing pivot, it marked the unraveling of the idea that a company belongs to a country. Ask where something is made, and the answer comes back in riddles. Ask where it belongs, and the answer is nowhere, or everywhere, which to American workers feels exactly like being left behind. If factories are fading, what replaces them? Gig work, remote robotics, retraining at 45. Communities across the Midwest already know the truth. The future didn't include them, and no one told them why. So where does that leave us? Can a country still thrive when its companies no longer call it home? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks.